It's morning on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020, my favorite day of my favorite year of my favorite life. And I've got to do an update for boaters and an update for voters. For boaters, the situation has changed somewhat here in the UK in the last 24 hours. Announcements went out on Monday that there would be a return to lockdown coming this Thursday. Last night, the Canal and River Trust updated its website, link in the thing below. But I want to just make it kind of clear for everybody, because last time during the early stages of lockdown especially, there was a lot of debate over ambiguity and people trying to read, sort of whatever they wanted to into the rules. It's real simple. We're going back to essentially the same lockdown as before. If you don't live on a boat, you aren't allowed to use the boat after this Thursday, except for to visit it, and you can't travel with it, and you can't stay overnight on it. Boats are not allowed to move, except for essential purposes. The only boats that are considered to have essential purposes are the ones which are liveaboards, and those essential purposes basically boil down to emptying your waste, water, black tank, your physical waste if you've got a composting toilet, etc., dealing with anything that needs to go into the LSAN, dealing with moving to get essential food and supplies, dealing with moving to get heating supplies, dealing to move with getting diesel if you require that for keeping your boat warm. Also such things as any type of medical treatment you need to access, or if you need to access veterinary treatment. Basically, it's got to be essential movements. And essential movements, unlike some of the stuff that happened in the prior version where people were like, oh, I've run out of peppers. I need to move forward again to get to the next food place. You're supposed to drain your larder and then go. You're supposed to drain your water and then go. You're supposed to run out of room for the waste and then go. And really, we should all do this. And the reason why we should all do this is because this second lockdown represents a monumental cock-up on the behalf of leadership, an abandonment of a concept of leadership, and a complete and utter abrogation of any form of responsibility by the people who are apparently above us. This is stupid. This disease is relatively minor. The actual infection is relatively minor. Yes, it'll be very serious for a very small portion of the population that receives the disease and is unfortunate enough to have comorbidities or in otherwise be susceptible to the increased dangers of the sudden acute respiratory breakdown that happens, but it's still relatively minor. We've all had a very public example of the fact that not very healthy people of not a very good age in an extremely high-risk group can, with care and attention, make it through and still keep talking and talking and talking. It's a relatively minor disease. In and of itself, on a one-by-one basis, it's not that big of a deal. It is very unfortunate for the people for who it is, but for the majority of us, it wouldn't be. However, that is absolutely not true if the majority of us get it all at once. This is epidemiology. Currently, COVID is worldwide approximately the third leading cause of death for humans this year. Currently, it is also the only one that has risen up the list of the top 10 at all. None of the other ones have changed positions. It's killing more people in a given week than a lot of wars have killed in their entire duration. That is crazy. And it's that crazy because our political leadership has essentially abandoned the fairly simple things that we would need to do in order to stop this thing in its tracks because of economic concerns. And this is one of the things that drives me nuts. Economics are always short-term. Economic worries are always short-term. Anything you think about the stock markets is a short-term proposition. Even if you're thinking about over the entire duration of your lifespan, it's still a short-term proposition. If you're worried about the economic outcomes, you need to think about it like this. If there are people producing this economy, and on the other side of an event, there are the same number of people, you still have the same economy. The only thing that the middle is going to do is cause damage. It's going to cause discomfort. It's going to cause lots of stress. It's going to cause all of the things people don't want. They don't want to be uncomfortable. They do want to have their freedoms. And I don't care. The problem is we can only save those things, really. We only ever can save those things, really, in the case of something like this, by putting a break between the fire and us. And that was what the lockdown was supposed to be in the beginning of the year, and that's what I truly thought that it was going to accomplish. I really thought that by the end of it, we'd all have come together in that way that things do in movies, where it's like, aha, there's this alien threat, let's go deal with it and band together as a planet. But nope, we didn't do that. Why didn't we do that? Good examples happened all over the planet. Bad examples happened everywhere else. Why? Politics. It comes down to politics. If you look at the politics of the people who did the worst, maybe you should make choices about that. If you look at the politics of the people who did the best, maybe you should listen to those, right? New Zealand seems to have done pretty well. South Korea, done fairly well. Japan, it's done relatively well. Even somehow, which still not quite understanding this, India has actually done relatively well, which is just a lot of luck considering how many people you have in such an extremely small sort of country in terms of physical geography. And there's just a lot of people in those cities, and somehow it hasn't done it. But, that's great. That's wonderful. That was my big, huge fear, was how it would play out in the really populous parts of the world. But like China is pretty much okay right now. And what isn't? America and the UK and Europe. And why? Well, largely, it's because at the end of what was actually too brief of a lockdown, we opened up too much. We thought we want to get everything back to normal, and we tried to do that, which meant that pubs got reopened and restaurants got reopened and people started socializing again, and especially people who felt like their personal risk was very low, thought I don't really have to worry about it too much, and everything kind of went back to a semi-normal. In fact, the main thing that has changed is the fact that people are walking around wearing masks, and people are going into restaurants, and they're going into pubs, and they're going into, stores, and they're putting on a mask, and as soon as they go to eat, they take that mask off, and they involve themselves in loud conversations. And yes, it's nice you're sitting 6 feet away from each other, but you're still breathing out this cloud, and that cloud can reach people. And the masks help. The masks help a little bit, but at the end of the day, if it isn't actually a surgical mask or a full respirator of this form that you would wear if you were inside of a toxic environment, then it's really just a social adaptation. It's a thing that we do to signal to everybody else that we're all trying, and it's minimal help, which there is, adds up, which it does, and we should all wear the masks when we're outside. But at the end of the day, we've gotten here because we've effectively abandoned, in this country, the really powerful notion of tracking and tracing and trying to maintain like a public knowledge of exactly where everything is. At the moment, that's a joke. I've got an app on my phone. It's the NHS app for COVID tracing, and I have to manually go 3 settings in to change my postcode. It then tells me whether or not my postcode is in risk, except for it doesn't. It is never even remotely up to date with the listing on the actual UK website, and on top of that, I get false messages saying that I've had an exposure, and then I click through to the app, and I have to go to a fact page on the NHS to find out that those messages mean the app is working, even though it's a false alarm. It's goofball. It's just utterly goofball. We're moving towards testing, great. We're moving towards the vaccine, sure, maybe. But reality is we're in a second lockdown now that is slated to end in December 2nd, and it probably won't until mid-January at the earliest. Might be longer than that. In the meantime, if you live aboard, stay in your boat. When you run out of water, when you run out of fuel, when you run out of whatever, if you're getting close to running out, reasonably close, be to the point where there's some actual worry, move forward, find your nearest place where you can service that need, and then turn around and go back to the same place or find the next one. Try not to keep moving, because it's moving from territory to territory that's actually the biggest risk. It's people switching positions. If everybody just froze in place and stayed frozen in place for roughly about 8 weeks, this thing would burn itself up. But they'd have to stay absolutely frozen in place. No going to work, no doing nothing, no traveling, no breaking up because you want to see your friends, no, nothing. Like, no excuses. We'd have to completely lock down to a degree that none of us outside of really China, South Korea, etc. are really prepared for. If we did that, we could kill this thing in its tracks. We haven't done that because we worry about the economic outcomes. So instead, what we do is, instead of tearing the bandage off, we try and pull it off slowly, and we endure much greater economic pain, and we endure much greater suffering over a much longer amount of time. It is the long tail. It's exactly what played out in 1918, 1920 with the then Spanish flu, which didn't start in Spain, by the way. It probably should have been called the American flu. Anyway, at the end of the day, we're stuck, we're locked down, and I hope that at some point in the future we all bring great retribution on those who have buggered this up. Around the world, like literally around the world, I am hoping we see governments fall to their failure, their absolute abject failure to not listen to the basic math of exponential increase. I'm tired. On to point 2. Today is election day in the United States. I hope very sincerely that every one of you who is over there and eligible to vote already has, regardless of what your feelings are, regardless of what your vote will be or has been. I hope you all vote. More importantly than hoping that you all vote, I hope you all I hope you all fight to ensure that every vote gets counted. Every vote is a legitimate vote. Every single one, until you can prove it isn't. Prove, not infer, not imply, prove. Everybody who has the right to vote should vote. There are 300 and something million Americans, and in most elections, only around 100 million vote. At the moment, we are looking at numbers that make it look like it's quite possible there's going to be an historic, absolutely historic outcome in terms of the number of people who show up to vote. And that, I think, is the most important thing. Because although you can probably infer what my political position is on this one, I have always felt like the most important thing is actually knowing what the hell the majority actually wants. I am not a fan of plebiscites. I am not a fan of public democracy. I'm a fan of history and science, especially what I call empiricism. Well, what they call empiricism, my variant on it. I think it is really important to look at history and go, what experiments have we tried and where have they led? And I look at democracy and I see Greece, ancient Greece, land of the high philosophies of the ancient world, not an empire. I look at Rome, center for almost 2 millennia, really, if you count all of the ways in which it influenced the rest of, sort of the Ottoman Empire and everything, the way it played out throughout Turkey and all that sort of stuff. But even if we just look at the Roman Empire itself, you've got several hundred years, certainly outlasting current empires by a large margin, and all hinging on the notion, at least at first, of democracy. Gone. Democracy, as far as I can tell, and especially republicanism, seems to be a really easily looked at, experiment in trying to see whether or not the majority can rule itself when there is any form of upper class, anybody who has economic power over or military power for that matter, anybody who has high power over a mass, you end up with what happens to democracies. They seem to become dual-party things, and then they become extremely polarized things, and then eventually they try and create Caligulas and Neros and empires, and then empires fall. I was born in America. I didn't spend most of my life there, but I was born there. I've always seen it as an incredibly enriching idea to humanity. Some of the concepts enshrined in the Constitution. It was fascinating to me as a child to recognize that until the Declaration of Independence, some people had never written some things down. But it began, as most things do, as a bit of a lie, right? I mean, all men are created equal, only applied to white landowning men. Didn't apply to anybody. I mean, right off the bat, it's all men are created equal. There isn't even a concept of the notion of women, much less children. And then it's eventually, in sputtering tiny little ways, expanded and expanded and expanded. But at the end of the day, 300 plus million people in the country, probably at least 200 and something million potentially eligible voters, and by hook and by crook and gerrymandering and the application of decades and centuries of racist and classist policies that everybody on both sides, especially of the two-party system, have fought to preserve more than they've fought to destroy, has led us to this moment. And it is a hell of a moment. I don't know which way it's going to go. I don't have any clue. I honestly, it's a toss-up. And that's crazy. Because literally the most militarily powerful nation the world has ever known is behaving like a schizophrenic at this moment. A schizophrenic that everyone else is staring at, but also trying to silently ignore rather than help. Whatever your vote's going to be, go vote. Whatever your hope is for it, hope that it's good. Whatever the outcome is, accept it as much as you can and prepare for the next fight if you want to. Don't let the outcome be stolen by anybody. And to do that, it means count every single vote. And it means encourage every single vote. If you've got friends and family who haven't voted and they aren't doing so because they can't get there, try and pick them up and take them there, wearing masks. If you've got neighbors who are going to be stuck in line, maybe take them some food. You know, maybe try and encourage them, trying to give them some comfort in this cold and terrifying moment. A cold and terrifying moment made significantly worse by the fact that there is a disease running wild amongst us, spreading like wildfire, and I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about disinformation. I'm talking about the fact that some of you are taking your news from this, and then you're going to turn to Facebook, and you're going to turn to noise, social media noise, brought to you by an algorithm that's trying to advertise to you and trying to disenfranchise you and trying as much as possible to keep you entertained as the void gets closer. Honestly, good luck to us all. If you have an option to vote, go vote. If you want to understand how to think like me about it, look at it like this. If you have a choice between two evils, choose the lesser. It's up to you which one that is. Good night. Good luck. Good God.